just admit people as they come in. I am going to kick it off, and I really initially just want to welcome everybody to the Auckland User Group. And for those of you that are new to the user group, thank you for joining us. Our normal user groups start off with the safety video that says, make sure your phone's on mute and the toilets are to the left and the right of the lift, and, the emergency stairs are off to the right. Seeing as a lot of us are working from home, I have been promoting a really good family initiative to go to the New Zealand Fire website and actually get a safety plan put together with you and your family, so that, God forbid, anything should happen while you are at home, you have a get out plan. So that's a really cool thing to be able to do with your family, is a plan to get out safely. So I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Carl Thomas, who is from... I can never remember your new company name, Carl. I'm sorry.
The new company is called Upper Echelon.
Upper Echelon, that's right. And is based here in Wellington, New Zealand. And Ben Duncombe, who is from Talent Hub and is based in Sydney, Australia.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome, everybody. So we're slowly getting our numbers up. For those that have just joined the call, we are recording this call as well. So just to let you know. So I'm going to kick it off, and I'm going to run it in kind of to a very quick session to begin with, just around, so if recruiting was a role that you wanted to move into, kind of how would you do that? And then I think the bigger conversation and the more interest that we have is, kind of what's going on in that recruiting space at the moment. What are the jobs like? How do we make ourselves shine? I know personally, I have my best friend who was made redundant. She's been applying for jobs. She applied for one in Hamilton. She's based in Tauranga, and she said the company had over 500 applicants. So, how do you make yourself stand out and actually be relevant when you're looking for a role? During the conversation, feel free to chuck your questions in the chat window. I'm also open if you guys want to unmute yourself and just kind of go, me, and ask the lads a question as we go through as well. Or we will have a Q&A session at the end of it. So if something comes up and you're kind of not wanting to interrupt the flow of things, feel free to, we'll open up the call at the end for Q&A as well. But really it's informal chat with Carl and Ben, and the opportunity for us to kind of pick their brains now that we've got their undivided attention till for the next hour anyway. So I'm just going to kick it off. Maybe Carl, will start with you, and then Ben, we'll toggle across to you. If someone wanted to go into recruitment, it's kind of like, what do you do? And what do you see as some of the key skills that someone would need to look at moving into that realm?
Well, first of all, I'd probably buy myself a big tub of anti-aging cream. Look, recruitment, I think when Ben and I got into it, and just to give you guys a bit of background, Ben and I worked together in London in the same company for 5 years together. Was it 5 years, Ben?
It wasn't 5 years for me. No, I think you were there for a long time. I was there for maybe 2 years. But yeah, the whole 2 years I was there, you were there.
So I think when we got into recruitment, it was often seen as a kind of job you do for 2 or 3 years, and then you go and do something else with your life, right? It was just one of those jobs that people did when they came out of university or whatever. Some people liked it, some people stuck at it, some people got good at it, and it certainly is an option. It's a career now rather than something you do for 2 or 3 years. If you wanted to be a recruiter, you've got to be very dedicated. You've got to enjoy speaking to people. You actually have to like people. So if you don't like people, don't bother. It's really not a career for you. You've got to be, like, to me, certainly in my head, you've got to be able to match things up. So you know how solution architects, for example, they draw diagrams on the board and they go, right, okay, well, that matches to there. There's the API, that goes into that goes there. It's sort of similar to that with people, and you're looking at who is going to fit well with which company, which job is going to go well with that person. And you can only do that by really talking to people and understanding why they want to do things, what their drivers are, what their motivations, everything else on top of that. So that would be the first piece of advice I'd give to anybody who wanted to be a recruiter, is to say, think about what drives you as a person. Yeah.
Ben, have you got any more thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think like my one piece of advice would be don't. No, I'm joking. No, I think it's an industry in which you need a lot of resilience. I think we have lots of ups and downs in our job, and I think like anyone can be a recruiter. Not everyone's going to enjoy it, and I also think that anyone can be a recruiter, but not everyone's going to be great at it. I think empathy is quite an important aspect of being a recruiter. I think we need to understand, that we're dealing with people's lives as well. It's not just jobs, but that has such a big impact on how people feel and the enjoyment they get out of life as well, right? So I think anyone can be a recruiter, but to be a good recruiter, you have to really want to add value to people's lives and careers. And I think not everyone has that driver.
Nice. And just quickly before we flick over on to can you see that? Are you seeing his accent there, Merrick? For you both, before we flick over into kind of the other side of the recruitment, what would you say has been kind of the most valuable lesson that you've taken as a recruiter to date that you utilise in your current roles now? And then maybe from that, what would be a piece of advice that you would give to people?
2 ears, 1 mouth. Very simple. You've got to listen. You've always got to listen. So we have particular ways of asking people questions. It's fairly simple sales, basic, what they call open questions. So for example, Joanne, if I was speaking to you about a new role, my first question would be, okay, what are you looking for? And after that, I would just shut up and I'd let you talk. And that goes for a lot of things in life. So if anyone's on interview, you're in there with the potential new boss, you'll ask them a question and then you be quiet and listen to what they've got to say.
Wise words. Ben, have you got something to add to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think for me, the probably the biggest thing that to learn is that not to take everything personally. I think we're dealing with people, right? So like my wife is sat in this room with me and she sells technology, but that technology can never say no. So I think in like we have to deal with both sides of a relationship, right? So we have to make a client happy, but we also have to make a candidate happy. And throughout your recruitment career, I think you'll get plenty of times where you get knocked back by one of those sides, and you just need to learn not to take that personally. It's everyone has reasons for making decisions, and sometimes just like sometimes recruiters go missing, sometimes candidates go missing too, and that's something that you have to kind of get to learn to deal with. The one thing I kind of what I'd have done differently, maybe I think everyone on this call probably has seen some of my LinkedIn posts and some of the content we create. I'd have created that a lot sooner. Like I'd have done that from the moment I got into recruitment, and I think I'd have built a personal brand like way back when I first started working with Carl. And if I had, I think it would things would be a lot easier.
Nice. So before we flick over, does anyone have any questions for either Carl or Ben? Like if you were looking at going into the recruitment or looking at taking that as a career path, did anyone have kind of any specific questions that we can shoot to them now? Otherwise, I'm going to shoot over to and flip the conversation. Nope, I'm going to take silence as consent. Yep, we're all good. Okie dokie. So now is a time when people are being made redundant. Obviously, we have a lot of changes going on in our ecosystem, and this is happening both across New Zealand and Australia. And also, everyone's working from home and doing a lot more remote working as well. So, with regards to someone who's looking for a new role, what would you say? Is it a good time for people to start really looking at upskilling, and along that way, is there more kind of functional or development, and where should they be looking at concentrating their upskilling role, upskilling themselves to kind of open up that market for them?
Shall I jump in? I think like everyone's different, right? So I think it's to say that you should upskill technically would be unfair, because some people just are never going to be technical and perhaps don't want to be. Like there is never a bad time to be upskilling. I think that's the main point. Is like now isn't just a good time. It's just there never is a bad time to keep learning and developing your skill set. I think that the right now is a good time to really assess your own skills and think, actually, where are my gaps, rather than just applying for roles and trying to do the same things you've always done. Like if you've always done trailhead and you've always followed certain trails, then maybe look at different ways in which you can upskill and see, like, is it actually my communication that's perhaps needs some work rather than my technical skills, or where am I falling down in past interviews, and where can I plug those gaps? So I think everyone as an individual needs to look at themselves and their skill set, and then think, how can I improve and continue to improve when I've got a job and into the future, not just right now.
And would you say, and I guess still talking to you, Ben, in Australia, at least in the market over there, are you seeing more functional or more technical? Like, and is the Salesforce job market seems to be kind of picking up or holding steady, or is it dropping off?
I think every week is different right now. I think like last week I was super positive about how the market was picking up, and this week it's a little bit quieter. So I think on the whole, we're not seeing the level of opportunity that we were 6 to 12 months ago. I think we always see more demand for developers. There always seems to be more requirements for developers in the market than functional resources. And I just think there's a massive skill gap in that development space. But I still think people should play to their strengths, right? Just because there's more developer roles, if you don't enjoy coding, or you can't get your head around it, probably shouldn't be a developer. Like I think you should really hone in on what you are good at and keep developing those skills and adding skills around those, rather than trying to recreate yourself and be something you don't really want to be.
And Carl, can you comment on what you're seeing happening here in the New Zealand market?
Yeah, I think it's equal. So what tends to happen in New Zealand is that there will be a project. So there's been a couple of projects recently in Wellington with the government, and there's an equal number of, say, at the moment I'm working on something, I need a technical architect, I need a developer, and I need a functional consultant. So it's typically what happens. It's more of a team base, but obviously the New Zealand market's a wee bit smaller than Australia. Yeah, so I'd say it's still fairly equal over here. There's opportunities, just not a lot of opportunity.
And given that, and Carl or Ben, given that the Australian market obviously just is a numbers game, right? So it's a bigger market over there than what we've got here in New Zealand. Is there opportunities for some of our Kiwi-based workers with the proven ability to work remotely to now actually have that skill set and be employed by Australia?
I would like to see it happen more. Like I'm struggling with some clients to even hire interstate in Australia. Sometimes not even interstate, just like intercity or town. I think like we do need to see more of it. I definitely think like everyone is working from home or has been working from home, but who's done it really well. And I think if people start to talk about that more and really make a story around how they've continued to add value and the outcomes that they've achieved while working from home, it can only improve. But right now, I do feel that most clients are still looking for someone that could be in the office when things are completely lifted.
And Carl, do you see that happening? I know I was talking to someone yesterday who was saying that some of the government departments, especially Wellington being such a big government base down there, some of the government department, the workers weren't able to work from home. So how does that affect you when you're recruiting into teams into kind of that market? Do they have to be Wellington based? No,
they don't. But it depends on the role. It depends on what they're doing, and it also depends on the mentality of people as well. So, and I suffer from this myself. I like to have my guys in the office as a rule. I do, because it's a face-to-face job. We bounce off each other, do things. But if you've got the right company, there's definitely more. There's more of a way forward with people looking towards getting people to work. So, for example, I've been speaking to somebody about a job up in Auckland, which is remote. and I'm starting to see a wee bit more of that now. But it's more of a mindset. And bear in mind, guys, like as much as we can influence a client or a company and put somebody in front of them and say, look, this person is based in Auckland, for example, but they could do a architect job for you in Wellington. Ultimately, is their call. So it's very much based on the mindset or the dictum of the company or the person we're recruiting for.
So very, very, very varied is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's commonplace now, but I would hope to think it would be more commonplace in the future, especially, you know, if your job isn't necessarily, say, customer or business facing. So again, your architect roles, potentially your developer roles, even your administrator roles to an extent. I don't think as a BA or as a functional consultant, you've got, you know, you're going to have to be on site with a client, doing your workshops, doing your training sessions and everything else that you guys do.
And do you see that staying in the Salesforce arena, you know, either of you or both of you, is it a good idea to stay in the Salesforce arena, or is it now a time? Are you seeing different areas having different or more job opportunities than what we've got in what we're seeing in the Salesforce space?
I think it's a great arena to be in. Like, I think I put a post up recently saying that I wouldn't necessarily, and this even goes before COVID, I wouldn't necessarily say that we are in a candidate short market anymore. And I think Trailhead has enabled people to become Salesforce professionals, or like without necessarily ever having worked on a project. So there are more Salesforce professionals in the market now than there ever have been. But you know, there are more and more companies signing up with Salesforce every week, and I think projects are getting more complex. So I still think there's a long runway of opportunity in the Salesforce ecosystem, but people just need to continually develop and you know, make themselves into the well-rounded consultant or developer that people are looking for.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't advocate leaving Salesforce. And again, a lot of these things are a matter of perspective. So IT as an industry is relatively recession-proof. Yeah, there's not a lot of jobs out there, but then again, there's not a lot of people actually losing their job, if that makes sense, in this industry. I would certainly look at other technologies, but as a complement to Salesforce, if that makes sense.
Not instead of.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe, you know, look at, if you're on the technical side, maybe look at some integration work. Yeah, if you're on the BA side or the functional side and you're working at the moment, get yourself potentially involved with another technology that could be useful in the future. What I find in New Zealand specifically is that they're less, and opposed to when I was recruiting in Australia, they're less worried about, you know, somebody who's got 8 years experience as a Salesforce developer. And a lot of the time, they're actually more interested in a wider breadth of experience with maybe just a few years and maybe a certification, if that makes sense. And again, that might be back to the difference in population, where in Australia, a lot more population, you can specialize, whereas I think in NZ, they like, okay, well, that's fine. You've got a couple of years, but you can do that job. And we also appreciate you've got these other skills that we can also utilize.
Something just occurred to me then, and it's just dropped out of my head. Oh, so I was going to ask you how you feel. I know that I've had a couple of questions put to me, which I've not been able to answer. So someone who's kind of in the graduate space and is looking for maybe a graduate role or an entry role, and, you know, people that are swapping and have taken the opportunity to upskill themselves into the Salesforce space, so they don't necessarily have Salesforce experience. What kind of advice can we give those of our colleagues and that are in our realm to try and encourage them to keep going rather than kind of giving up from where they are just because we're in this weird space right now?
Use your networks, definitely. Like from our point of view, I don't know how you find this, Ben, companies rarely engage us to find less experienced people. Your networks are absolutely key in whatever way you can get. I'd say apply for every Salesforce admin position you can, being generally the entry level to it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like I could count on one hand in the last 5 years how many clients have engaged us to find them a junior resource. I think like and this comes back to my point about recruitment and being resilient. Like I think that's the key, right? You kind of are acting as you're your own recruiter when you're junior, because you have to. It's a numbers game. It's the more contact you have with potential hirers, the more likely you are to secure your first role. And I think like the big thing for me would be, like Carl said, use your network, but don't just rely on job boards. I think that's why people do lose hope, because they're just applying for jobs on Seek and on the different range of job board options, and they're not hearing back. And then I think that's easy to get disheartened. But if you do use your network and start reaching out and having meaningful discussions with people, you're far more likely to get a result than just sending a job off to a job board. Yeah,
you've got to be going to the user groups, and bear in mind, guys, like for me or Ben to put out a Seek advert, that costs us $300 a piece. All right, we buy them in bulk, but it's an expensive exercise to sort of go out there for sort of the more junior positions and advertise it. It's quite expensive to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the advice of the networking is great, and unfortunately with us being virtual, it's kind of limited, I guess. However, I did get some good news just today that apparently we can open up here in New Zealand now and start having some face-to-face. So I know here in Auckland we're going to look at starting small with our Trailhead Tuesdays. So, that will be a really good way of being able to engage with the network as well. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
I would just add to that. I think like until you can be in person, like you just have to use every opportunity, right? So on the right-hand side of my screen, I can see every single person's name on this meetup. Like if I was a junior person on this call now, I'd be taking a screenshot of that and then adding everyone afterwards, thanking them for joining and connecting, and just using every single opportunity to connect with more people in the ecosystem. Because there could be a hiring manager on this line that's going to soon be looking for a junior admin. Like you don't know until you start making those contacts.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. There was a guy a few years ago in Australia, Ben. I've forgotten his name, but he was junior. And he was new to the country. And
Echelon.
Yes, that's it. Yes. Anyway, so this chap, he was a borderline nuisance, wasn't he? He used to call us up like once a week. Have you got a job? Can you do this? But all right. But the persistence paid off. And after making all these calls and all these connections and going to all these meetings, he landed himself a really cool job.
Yeah, I think he made a name for himself amongst recruiters, but like everywhere you looked on LinkedIn, Akil was there. And I think, that helped him secure a role, and that was his goal.
Mm.
Awesome. So following on from that with the applications, and I noticed that Stefan called out in the chat here that when we were looking at upskilling and sort of cross-skilling, AWS and MuleSoft are great additions to your skill set if you are looking at extending it out. And I can attest to that. We have one of our young graduates is learning AWS, and it's actually is actually helped him get a place on a project now because he does have that cross skill set. So really good advice, Stefan. Thank you. So a couple of really kind of out there questions. Are there actually any fake jobs out there? Like I read a LinkedIn post the other day that someone had said, if you guys are not actually hiring, can you take your job down, because it's debilitating to put your CV in and not get anything back just for CV gathering. And alongside that, I guess, if they are doing that, how do we know that the company is secure given the circumstances that we find ourselves in as well? So kind of double-barreled.
Do you want to go first, Ben, or shall I?
I don't mind. Like my honest answer is yes, there are definitely fake jobs out there, and unfortunately, that's just the case. Like I've found that all through my recruitment career, there will always be jobs online that aren't live jobs, and I think there are different reasons for that. Sometimes it's like we actually don't advertise any of our roles on job boards. Like we've never spent $1 on a job board in the 5 years that we've been going. But we do have jobs on our website, and unfortunately, some of them might lapse, and we haven't taken them down. So that's just more of an admin issue. But like we do see jobs online that we just know not to be true, on LinkedIn, on job boards, and it is a problem. And also I've noticed recently that LinkedIn are scraping jobs. So and that's something that they've never really done before, but they're taking jobs off of websites. So we're, without paying for job slots on LinkedIn, some of our old jobs have turned up on LinkedIn, and then we're getting a lot of people reaching out to jobs that we aren't advertising any longer. So I think, there are reasons perhaps it does happen, but on the whole, it shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, I would agree. Certainly, and I've had conversations with quite some quite senior people in LinkedIn about that, because what's happened is that my company adverts have appeared on LinkedIn as a job, and I don't use LinkedIn for advertising jobs. I think I use Seek and occasionally Trade Me. Yeah, certainly, we wouldn't post a fake job, but yeah, there probably are out there. And how do you see whether a company, do your research on it, speak to the recruiter, or maybe speak to somebody that's worked there as well. Google search, news. It sounds simple stuff, but a lot of people actually don't do it. Just see what financial position they're in. Obviously, the industry they're in as well could play a factor. I mean, I wouldn't be going to work for Qantas right now, as an example, which is, very sad news about everyone that's lost their job, but you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
On the fake job part, I mean, there absolutely are, unfortunately, jobs that get advertised by recruitment agencies that like they're trying to fill their database or things like that, and that's the negative side of it. But also, one thing to bear in mind: often companies will go to more than one recruitment agency. So, if you see 5 Salesforce developer roles pop up in Wellington, there's a good chance it's one company hiring for one person, but 5 agencies are advertising it, and it gives a kind of skewed view on the market. So yeah, I think and that's why job boards make so much money, right? Because so many people are advertising the same role and paying the same amount for that advert. It's not based on who fills the role. It's just the people want to get as much coverage as possible.
Yeah, it's a really poor policy that's been going on for years, unfortunately. And when I speak to a company about a job now, and if they are working with another recruiter already, I'll be of a mind not to take on that piece of work, because it's no good for people in the market, and certainly not at the moment.
No, I agree. So do you think then, along that lines, are people who are looking for roles better to look for a permanent role, or are there contract roles out there at the moment as well? And which would be your recommendation on which way to head?
Certainly at the moment, I would go for whatever's out there if you're actively looking. I wouldn't choose between one or the other. As I say, there's a mix of roles out there. A lot of companies are under pressure budget-wise, and that's going to flow into their CapEx spend. That CapEx spend will typically dictate a contract. We're seeing a lot more fixed-term roles, which people generally don't like to take. They either prefer permanent or a daily rate or an hourly rate, as they typically get in New Zealand. But yeah, I certainly think at the moment, if you're looking, it's a question of you take what you can get, really. Not to sound all doomsday about it, but that's the way I feel.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the beginning of this, just as we were going into lockdown, I actually saw some people purposefully looking for contract roles and actually leaving permanent roles to take contract roles. And I think it was just to get into the market before they felt that it was going to drop further. And if they could get into a decent contract at that point, then it would see them through. I agree that if there's a role that you can do and that you're going to be happy, and then it shouldn't matter right now if it's contract or permanent. Just make sure it's a role that you can add value in, and you're going to continue to learn from, and ultimately take the role that's best for you.
Nice, nice. And how long do you think, or are you seeing, how long is it going to take this market to recover from what you're seeing from your perspective in the recruitment and business side?
I'd love to say not it's not going to take long, but I don't think anyone really knows. I think, you know, every day you read in the news that like Melbourne this week has had some more cases, and I know it was New Zealand last week, and then America. And I think it's right now, I think it's more the unknown that's keeping people wary and kind of stopping people from opening those the checkbooks to hire new people. I think there's a range of challenges. Like I have roles at the moment where I'm waiting for people to be able to enter Australia to be able to get that role. Like they're coming back or they're coming here for the first time, but they have a visa, and the hold up of being able to fly is a major challenge. In other cases, I think people are just a bit uneasy about the whole situation and just don't know what to do right now. So I'd like to say, like, new financial year, great, let's all push ahead. But I think that would be a bit, that'd be a real guess. I'm not too sure.
I'm going to be slightly more optimistic. I don't know how you feel about this, Ben, but do you remember when the credit crunch hit, as the guys call it over here, the GFC?
Yeah.
And you knew, like in 2008, when that last recession that Ben and I both experienced in the UK, and then I went to Australia, and Ben wasn't too far behind. You knew that was going to go on for a few years. Like that was hard because the jobs fell out of the market. You know, I remember placing people into Lehman Brothers, the investment bank, and then, you know, everyone just left the next day, and it was going to be 2 or 3 years of tough cheese. Like, not a lot of jobs, not a lot of money, trying to pay your mortgage or your rent or whatever it was you had to pay at the time. I don't think this is going to be the same. I really don't. And I'm going to say it's going to be a tough year for everyone, 2020, but I think 2021 will be fine. Ultimately, on the health side, it does depend on a vaccine being found, and I believe they will find something.
Fingers crossed, hey? So along that lines then, given the fact that we want to stand out, and like I said at the beginning of the call, like I know my friend, when she applied for a role in Hamilton, she was told there was 500 applicants. How true that is, I don't know, but that's a lot of applicants for a role. So how can you actually make yourself stand out and make yourself be known even if there was 20 or 25 applicants for a role? What would your suggestions be to say, hey, pick me?
I think like we're in a great market for making yourself known. I think like we have such a community of, and it's a global community, but in your region and city, you'll also have a community. And I think you can quite quickly become known if you're not just relying on sending CVs to job boards, but you're creating content. You are using a developer org and building cool things that you're talking about on LinkedIn. Like I can still remember when COVID first hit, a few people built some Lightning components in a developer org around tracking cases, and like the amount of engagement that got on LinkedIn, like that person, as soon as someone was looking for a developer, they would have been top of anyone's mind for a job because they'd showcased that they can build Lightning components, and they did it around it with a topical piece of work. And I think it's just about being creative and if you're just sending a CV to a job board, then all people are looking at is your experience. And if you don't have a huge amount of experience, you can't even rely on that. So I think, just building things in your own time, creating your own experience in developer org, and not just doing trailhead badges, not just getting certifications, but doing things that are different to the rest of the pack.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, definitely. And I think, Ben and what he's built with Talent Hub, his content is absolutely superb. So I think if anyone needs or wants any advice on that, definitely speak to Ben or Gemma. From a practical level, from a CV writing point of view, and I say the same to everyone that has a CV in front of me, you might have done a few things and you'll describe those things in your CV. So in your last place of employment, you did A, B, C, and D. But a good idea with all of these is to put figures behind the facts. So, for example, I was a Salesforce administrator at a company, PwC. I managed 300 users. I did the permissions for this, that, and the other. I achieved this. I got accommodation for that. If you put numbers behind the facts, then when someone's reading the CV, they can build a picture in their head of the kind of person and the kind of things you've done. And that can actually be the difference between getting an interview or not, because that person, and especially in IT where a lot of people have the logical side of their brain, they're seeing, oh, okay, this person was an administrator for 150 users. Oh, that's exactly what we need. But if you just put, I'm a Salesforce administrator, oh, I'm really great, it doesn't come across as well.
I think I'm going to be updating my CV. Not that I need to, mind, but.
And a lot of people stress about their CV a lot. I don't think it's a tool to get you an interview. It's nothing more. You just need to make sure that CV is enough for somebody to look at it and go, yeah, I'll interview that person. Job done. Don't worry about making it pretty, putting pictures on it, anything like that. Just that, just getting you an interview. That's the point of the exercise.
And how long, like I was told at one stage quite a while ago that 3 pages is kind of the max for a CV. Kind of, is this kind of, as recruiters, do you need the front 2 or 3 paragraphs to grab your attention? Or are you just so used to reading CVs, you'd read 4 or 5 pages?
I never like fully read 4 or 5 pages of a CV, but I wouldn't stop. Like, I think there's this myth that your CV can't be any longer than a page, and it's just not true. Like, I think as long as the information on your CV is relevant to the role you're applying for, then there is no like, oh, don't go past 3 pages or get rid of that 4th page. I think you just need to make sure that every single line of information is selling you to that opportunity. Like I would, if your friend applied for a role and they had 500 or 300 responses, I guarantee they didn't read every CV. So like you do need to make sure that the first page is going to catch their attention, otherwise they won't get to the second. So it's making sure that the most recent role is as relevant as possible to the role that you're applying for. And like Carl said, like back that up with facts, and don't make those facts up, but like dress your CV in a way that just, it's really obvious to the person that's reading it that you're the right person for that job.
Yeah, it makes me really cross with CV experts that try and put rules around CVs, because there are no rules. It's common sense. It doesn't have to be a certain number of pages. There's some contractor CVs we've got, and they're sort of 10 to 15 pages with all the contracts they've done.
Life experience, huh? Cool. And on that then, so, and I guess given that we know we come from a world of automation and we know what's possible, why are companies not replying to CVs? Like why would people be choosing not to reply to an application?
I think like most companies should nowadays, especially if you're applying through Seek. I don't know. I don't use Seek, so I don't know what the automation options are. Like, can you tick a box and reply to that person saying no? I'm not sure. I think if you're applying directly to a company, you should get a response. I just think like unfortunately the volume of applicants for some jobs is high, and the person that is reviewing the CVs isn't always the hiring manager. It could be someone in talent acquisition that's got 20 roles that they're looking at, and they're just looking for buzzwords and to see, can I see that on the CV that I can see in the job description? And if so, I'm going to follow up with this person. If I can't, I'm not. Unfortunately, candidate experience still isn't the number 1 priority for a lot of companies, although it should be. And I think like that needs to change, but it's just a real slow burner with a lot of companies.
Yeah, I just echo everything that Ben just said, and that's the reason. If you really feel that you are suited for a role and you've applied for it, and you've not heard anything back, pick up the phone and give the recruiter or the hiring manager or whoever it is a call, and just say, look, I've sent my CV in. I appreciate it's been a week or whatever. Just wondering if I'm shortlisted for this, or if not, and if I'm not, could you tell me? As Ben says, the onus is still unfortunately, on the candidate to do the work in terms of everything else. When that changes, look, the best and brightest minds in our industry are working on it, but it's a slow burner.
And I guess in the market, if someone is dealing with quantity, they're going to take their top 10, right, and that'll be about it. Top 10 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do you think that people should be lowering salary expectations at the moment to be able to land a role?
Not really. I mean, have prices dramatically dropped for your food or your rent or your mortgage? Are you doing a different job? Not really. People know how much it is to pay people. I don't think, unless your salary expectations are high, no, I don't think you should be lowering your expectations. And it would have to be a pretty frank conversation with whoever is doing the hiring, why you're lowering your salary expectations.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like, again, take your own individual case into, like, you know if you need to drop your salary expectations because you're not getting any luck with jobs, or you're desperate for a job. I wouldn't want people taking this the wrong way and not doing it if they're on the verge of not being able to pay their mortgage and whatnot. But I think, like, we did see a few opportunistic companies dropping what they were paying in the first couple of weeks of COVID. And, like, I'd say, like, a senior developer in Australia might earn between 900 and 1050 a day, and we saw a few companies looking to pay like 700 in the first couple of weeks. But I think that has changed, and Cole's right. If you're doing the same job and the market rate has consistently been X, then I don't necessarily think it's time to start charging Y. I just think you just need to continue delivering the value and know your worth.
Yeah, and if anyone says to you, "Oh, we've got another candidate," and this person is asking for a bit less, just stand your ground and see where you go. You'll be all right.
I'm just having a look at Merrick here. So the challenge is to calculate your salary expectations between being a contractor and a perm. Yeah, I guess there's quite different rates that you would get. Yeah,
Merrick, we get asked this question a lot. Ben, do you want to answer this one, mate?
Yeah, don't just time your daily rate by 365 and expect to be paid that. I think it's, there is no magic formula. The other thing I would say is don't pay too much attention to salary guides, because I think things change so much. Like, there are so many markets within a market. So you might have, like, if I speak for New South Wales in Australia, like, government departments were paying X, and other private sector clients were paying Y for so long, and they might be looking for the same skill set, but there was such a difference in between what companies were willing to pay. So it's $1 million question, and the answer often isn't $1 million. But what should a contractor be looking for if they move for a permanent role? I think it's just having conversations. What typically are people earning, and what have you seen people earn over the last 6 months, and what are the variations between different companies and industries?
Yeah, like the whole point of a contract is to do a job for a period of time. So it's like, if you're a company and you're going into put in a Salesforce implementation for a client, they'll quote a job. So if you're a painter and you want to paint somebody's house, and you'll say, right, well, I'll charge you $3,000 or whatever it might be. That's the point of a contract. They're very, very different. And a permanent job, again, with all the benefits and the holidays, they're just so different. I wouldn't, Marek, I just wouldn't compare the two. Just take it on a case-by-case basis, each job that comes up, whether it be contract or perm.
Nice, great advice. The other thing I've seen that people have been doing as well on LinkedIn at the moment is reaching out to their friends and colleagues and saying, kind of, if you've been made redundant, let me know what your skill sets are, and I will publish you and push you and help you. Do you think that's a good idea?
If it helps one person, yes.
Yeah, agreed. I think and I know everyone's meaning well, but I think authenticity is important as well. Like, because otherwise it just becomes like, every time I see that, I'm reading it, has this person been made redundant, or is it another one of those copy and paste messages around? And then when you do get the same copy and paste thing, then people start to stop looking at it. So I think, being authentic and perhaps approaching it in different ways than just copying and pasting what you're seeing on LinkedIn would be helpful. Maybe you hear about someone that's been made redundant and you create a post about that person and talk about what you did on a project together and why that project was so successful because of that person. But just copying and pasting something that's gone kind of viral might not be the best way to do it right now.
Agreed. Okay, so that was kind of all of our serious questions. Does anybody else have any other questions that they want to throw at Carl and Ben before I ask them a couple of silly ones? Try and get some information out of them that maybe that that they're not aware, or they're gonna share with us just because we've been asked.
Hi guys, Abhinay here. Thank you so much for having a wonderful session today. So many questions got clarified. I'm quite happy though. I have a question on that. I'm from a non-Salesforce background. I'm trying to make my move into Salesforce. Consider I have plenty of certifications. I have 4 certifications, and I'm a Salesforce Ranger also. But when we apply for the roles, I'm really quite not sure what goes into the CV that can attract the recruiters, because you cannot really project the real-time experience in actual project, right? Any suggestions on that?
I saw an example this week of someone building a CV in communities. So they didn't have a huge amount of Salesforce experience, but they used their own time to build a community, like I don't know how they did it. It was in a developer org, I'm guessing, and they're using that as their CV. So as soon as you look at that, you think, right, this person can use Salesforce. Like, I think it gives them a bit more credibility than someone that just has Trailhead written on their CV. Like, will that alone get you a job? I can't guarantee it, but I think it's like showcasing your skills and it's kind of like a portfolio, right? So in some other markets, people don't get hired unless they're able to show a portfolio of work. So like UX, UI, you have to present your portfolio. And I think it's important for junior Salesforce people to have a portfolio and to be constantly adding to that portfolio. So it's always too late to start, because like if you're only starting now, then you've already missed 6 months worth of work that you could have done. But like, now is the time to start if you haven't already, and just get building something that you can just keep developing, and take along to interviews as well to show people what you can do.
Yeah, thank you.
So Vinay, in this market, when recruiters talk about a candidate, what do we say? Sometimes says a candidate short market. And in those kind of markets where there's a lot of jobs and not a lot of candidates, it's much easier to make a move into something that you haven't previously got experience with, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
So in this market at the moment, where there's quite a few candidates out there, it's harder to make that step upwards, because you're competing from an interview and a job point of view with people that have already done the job and are moving from a sideways way into that job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, Carla. Yeah, that completely makes sense. Now the market is not so good.
Yeah.
But what's your background, Vinay?
I'm a civil CRM technical consultant.
So yeah, I think like the key is, although you don't have Salesforce experience, you have CRM experience, you have technical experience. Like, how can you use that to get ahead of people that perhaps don't have that exposure? And like, how can you draw out that experience in a way that companies are going to see you can add value? And I think, yeah, showcasing your skills. Like, it's not the best market in the world right now, but with the right attitude, with resilience, and with being creative, there'll be opportunities that you can find.
Yep. Thank you.
In a normal market, so like we had last year, Vinay, I'd be saying to the client, the customer or the company, I'd be saying, look, he hasn't got all the Salesforce skills that you might have wanted in the first, but interview him, have a chat with him, see what you think about him, and take that on board.
Yeah. Hopefully the market will be back next year. Let's see.
It will. This won't last forever, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's where the resilience comes in, Vinay. We all just kind of have to just kind of get on with getting on. Reach out to me again, Vinay. I'll send you a link with regards to that online CV that Ben was talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Coolies. Anybody else got some serious questions for Ben and Kyle before I start? There we go. Are the opportunities for graduates getting better now?
Not in all honesty, no, Anne. Sorry. I'd love to say they were, but they're not.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to Cole's point before about like we're probably not the best people to like recruiters generally aren't the best people unless we're graduate recruiters. We're probably not going to have that many opportunities. But I'd be like connecting with people like Ken and Michelle, working in big corporate businesses and consulting businesses, because like at some point they will hire grads, I'm sure, and if you can build relationships with people like that beforehand, you might stand a better chance of getting into those organizations.
Cool, thank you. And we have another question from, I want to say, Juan. How can we get concrete exposure using newly acquired Salesforce skills in the New Zealand setting? So, Carl, this one for you.
Right. So you've acquired Salesforce skills via Trailhead or at work? Just to clarify, John.
Jean, you can unmute and chat if you would prefer.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I pushed on the wrong button here. Anyway, so yeah, I just acquired I just acquired new skills using the platform. So yeah, I'm still building up my skills, and I was actually curious on how I can get that exposure here in New Zealand.
What I would do, mate, is use your network. It depends on the skill it is. So use your network, find out what companies is implementing this particular piece of Salesforce. Find out who the Salesforce partner is, maybe, that's working with that company, and get your CV into them. The only way you're going to get concrete exposure is by working on those projects. Does that help? Oh, super.
Yes, he said yes. Okay, cool. So there was a second half to Anne's question that we missed, and thanks, Stefan, for answering in the chat as well. But Ben and Carl, when you're looking at Salesforce CVs, does the number of badges, super badges, count when you're looking at them? So, you know, the Trailhead Ranger status and what's going on in there, as well as the certifications that someone has?
I think yes, in that it shows that you're committed and that you're putting yourself out there to learn and grow. But I wouldn't because Trailhead is great, but everyone uses it, so it's really hard to differentiate yourself because everyone's doing it, right? It's the same as now, like with certifications, everyone's getting certifications. So like you need them because if you don't have them, then people are like, well, why haven't you got them? But I don't think alone they help and they're good to have, but they're not going to secure you a role. I think it's about what you do with the knowledge you gain from the platform and how you showcase that knowledge and how you plug other gaps that you have. And I think they're equally as important, if not more, at times.
Yeah, I think, and also as a recruiter, we look at everything. So it's not just your Trailhead badges, as important as they are, and obviously very much encourage you getting them, but it's the kind of person you are, the kind of job you want. There's so many things that go into our job when we're speaking to somebody, and the questions we ask are quite wide-ranging and deep as well. So we're really going into everything with a potential candidate, not just the qualifications they've got.
Nice, and I think that's quite good points for everybody as well, not just at a graduate level, right? So we're just on 5 o'clock now. Awesome. So Ian saying thanks to you guys. Does anyone else have any kind of other serial questions? Cool. So, lads, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
I would like, so I'm sure you might have all seen X-Men. I quite like the ability to control people's minds. And when I say I quite like, I would almost give my right arm to develop that superpower sometimes. That was what I would like to be.
I'd be a Salesforce certified technical architect.
So, Ben, if I asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up, that would be what it is?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. What did I want to be when I think, like, I'm from the UK. I think everyone wanted to be a footballer. So, or everyone I grew up around wanted to be a footballer, but yeah, I wasn't quite good enough. So recruitment it was.
Carl, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a pilot, and as it happens, I am a pilot. So that I've achieved that. I'm happy.
Nice, that's a big tick.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks, guys. One more thing before you go. What's a fun fact that you're willing to share with us at the end?
Oof. Fun fact.
Like personally, a fun fact. It's a fun fact.
Do you want some help?
Yes.
You're known as the Earl of Featherstone.
A fun fact. So I live in Featherstone in the Wairarapa, and I'm known locally as the Earl of Featherstone because of my English accent.
Right, let's just note that one down for next time you're in Auckland.
I don't think I have a fun fact. Maybe Gemma can give a fun fact. She's on the line. Maybe she knows something about me.
You're on mute, Gemma.
Just unmuting. Fun fact about Ben is he doesn't support the football team that he should be, given where he lives. He supports Newcastle, which is nowhere near.
Yeah, I should support the same team as Carl, actually. But and the reason I support Newcastle is because my mum fancied one of the players, and she supported Newcastle, and therefore so did I. But I didn't fancy the player, should I add?
Nice. I would just like to say a really big thank you to both Carl and Ben for giving us your time this afternoon. I've certainly learned quite a few things, which I really appreciate you sharing and having that open and honest conversation. I've noticed as a couple of people have dropped off, have also passed on their thanks. For those that did join a little later, I have recorded this call, so I am happy to share the link. And Ben and Carl, I'll send you the link as well. And if anybody does have any further questions, both Ben and Carl are on LinkedIn, so feel free to link up with them as well as obviously I'm on LinkedIn, keeping involved with this user group. And like I said, thankfully we are now able to go back into some face-to-faces. So I am getting together with my co-leader from Trailhead Tuesday tomorrow, and we'll be planning that one. So we're going to plan a face-to-face, but I think we'll do a dial-in for those that still want to dial in as well. So again, once again, Ben and Carl, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you giving us and being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well done, Michelle.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Good to see you all.
Thank you,
Ciao.
Alice.
Thanks, Ben. Ciao.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Speak soon.
Good to see you, Ben and Gemma.
Happy to see you.